The medical bracelet bit into Maya's wrist before anything else registered. Not the cold, not the ache in her abdomen where they'd made the incisions, not even the smell. That particular mix of hand sanitizer and asphalt that only exists in hospital parking decks at hours when nobody should be awake. Just the plastic band cutting off circulation, making her fingers tingle. She blinked against the dome lights someone had left on, saw the gray cloth interior of her family's SUV and thought, this is wrong. Her phone said 2:47 a.m. The surgery had ended around 10. She remembered the recovery room, the nurse with the bright voice saying something about discharge instructions, the wheelchair ride that turned fuzzy at the edges. After that, nothing. Just this. Back seat, IV port still taped to her arm, dried blood at the crook of her elbow, and the devastating quiet of being alone in a place you shouldn't be. Maya pushed herself upright. Her head swam. The parking deck stretched empty in both directions. Level 3, Section B, every space vacant except for this one car with her in it. The keys weren't in the ignition. The doors were unlocked. Someone had put her here and left. She pulled the hospital blanket tighter around her shoulders, thin blue cotton, barely warm, and made herself think through the fog of anesthesia still clinging to her brain. Derek had driven her to the hospital. Mom was supposed to meet them there. Dad said he'd come after work. All three of them had been in the waiting room when they wheeled her back. She remembered that part clearly. Dad reading a magazine, Mom scrolling her phone, Derek pacing by the coffee machine. The sliding doors of the ER entrance glowed 40 yards away. Maya got her legs under her, stepped out onto concrete that felt like ice through her hospital socks, and started walking. Each step pulled at the incisions. She kept one hand pressed to her stomach, the other trailing along car bumpers for balance, and tried not to think about how cold it was, how empty, how nobody had noticed she wasn't where she was supposed to be. 3 hours, her mind kept whispering. You've been out here 3 hours? A security camera hung from the ceiling near the stairwell, red light blinking. Maya wondered if anyone watched those feeds in real time or if they just saved them for later, for lawsuits and incident reports. She wondered if someone had seen her lying there in the back seat, unconscious, and decided it wasn't worth investigating. Or maybe the camera didn't even work. Maybe the red light was just for show, a deterrent that deterred nothing. The ER doors opened with a mechanical sigh. Warm air hit her face, and then she was inside, fluorescent lights making her squint, and a nurse at the triage desk looked up with the kind of expression people get when they see something impossible. Recognition flickered across her face. Name tag said Carmen, and her mouth opened slightly, closed, opened again. Honey, Carmen said, coming around the desk fast. Your brother checked you out 3 hours ago. Maya let Carmen guide her to a chair, accepted the heated blanket someone produced from somewhere, and watched the nurse pull up something on her computer screen. Other staff gathered. A security guard with a coffee stain on his uniform. A resident who looked 12 years old, stethoscope hanging crooked around his neck. Everyone kept glancing at Maya like she might disappear if they looked away, like she was a ghost who'd wandered in from the parking deck to haunt them. Discharge papers signed at 11:43 p.m., Carmen said, scrolling. Derek Morrison signing for patient Maya Morrison. Wheelchair assist to vehicle, level 3? She looked at Maya, and something soft and terrible moved behind her eyes. Where's your family? I don't know. Maya's voice sounded scraped out, like she'd been screaming. She hadn't been screaming. I woke up in the car. Carmen's jaw tightened. She exchanged a look with the security guard, something unspoken passing between them. Let me pull up the security footage, she said, just to verify the timeline. They pulled it up on a monitor in the back office, everyone crowding around to watch. Maya saw herself on the grainy screen, unconscious, head lolled to one side, hospital gown riding up to expose her thigh, while Derek wheeled her through the automatic doors. Mom's silver sedan was visible in the background, already running, exhaust visible in the cold air. Derek loaded Maya into the SUV's backseat with surprising efficiency, one hand supporting her head, the other guiding her legs. He tucked the blanket around her shoulders, adjusted her position so she wouldn't slide forward, closed the door with a gentle click. Professional, practiced. Like he'd done this before. Then he walked to his own car, parked 3 spaces down. Mom pulled out first, headlights cutting through the darkness. Derek followed 10 seconds later. The SUV sat there, Maya inside, dome light glowing like a beacon in the empty parking deck. The timestamp in the corner ticked forward. 11:47, 11:48, 11:49. At 12:03 a.m., the dome light finally went dark on a timer, and Maya disappeared into shadow. "We've been calling the numbers on file," Carmen said quietly, voice tight with something that might have been anger. "No answer yet." Maya nodded. She was watching drunk college kids get stitches now, a girl with a split lip laughing too loud, her friends filming on their phones. One of them was crying, mascara running down her face, saying something about how it wasn't supposed to happen like this. The fluorescent lights hummed a frequency Maya could feel in her teeth. Someone brought her water in a paper cup. She drank it and realized she'd been shaking, a fine tremor in her hands that wouldn't stop. The heated blanket helped. The water helped. But the shaking came from somewhere deeper than cold. Carmen sat down next to her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You want me to call the police?" "And tell them what?" Maya's laugh came out bitter. "My family forgot me?" "That's not—" Carmen stopped, seemed to reconsider. "That's one way to put it." "What's another way?" Carmen was quiet for a moment, then, "In my 12 years doing this job, I've never seen someone get left in a parking deck. Not once. People forget discharge instructions, they forget medications, they forget to schedule follow-ups, but they don't forget the actual person." Maya thought about that. The weight of it. They don't forget the actual person. "Maybe I'm forgettable," she said, trying for lightness, landing somewhere closer to despair. "Don't," Carmen said, sharp and sudden. "Don't do that to yourself." Her phone buzzed at 4:11 a.m. A text from Derek. "OMG, we're so sorry. Thought you were with Mom. Coming back now. Not a call. Just a text." 16 words that were supposed to explain 3 hours of absence. Maya stared at the words until they stopped meaning anything. Just shapes on a screen, pixels arranged in patterns that formed letters, that formed words, that formed an excuse that didn't hold water. She thumbed back through her messages, found the family thread, scrolled to the night's earlier exchanges. Derek at 10:47 p.m. "Surgery went fine, she's in recovery." Mom at 11:08 p.m. "Good, I'm exhausted." Dad at 11:15 p.m. "See you at home." The discharge papers, Carmen had said, were signed at 11:43 p.m. Maya looked at that timeline until her eyes burned. 28 minutes between Dad's text and Derek's signature. What happened in those 28 minutes? What conversation took place in the waiting room? What decision was made? What sequence of events led to all three of them leaving while she slept in the back seat of a locked car? She looked at the text again. "Thought you were with Mom." Sure. What kind of thought was that, exactly, when you were the one who signed the discharge papers, wheeled her to the car, positioned her in the back seat with her head supported and the blanket tucked just so, when you closed the door and walked away without checking, without confirming, without even glancing back? "Your family's here," Carmen said, touching Maya's shoulder. They came through the sliding doors together, Mom first, mascara smudged, still in her work clothes from yesterday. Derek behind her, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes down. Dad last, holding a paper coffee cup that had gone cold hours ago, face carefully blank. Mom started crying immediately, reached for Maya like she might fold her into an embrace, but Maya stayed seated, the heated blanket pulled tight. "Baby, we're so sorry," Mom said, voice cracking, hands reaching. "It was so chaotic, everyone was so tired." "We thought you were with Mom," Derek said too quickly, like he'd been practicing the line in the car. "I swear, Maya, I thought—" "You signed me out," Maya said. Her voice stayed level, which surprised her. "You signed the papers. You put me in the car." "I know, but then Mom said she'd take you home, and I thought you were in her car." "I was in Dad's car." Silence. Derek's mouth worked around words that didn't come. Dad took a sip of his cold coffee, grimaced, said nothing. Mom's crying got quieter, turned into soft hiccups, the kind that always made Maya feel guilty when she was younger. The kind that used to work, that used to make Maya apologize for things that weren't her fault, just to make the crying stop. Not anymore. Maya watched her mother's hands shake and wondered if it was guilt or just exhaustion, or maybe something rehearsed on the drive back, planned out in whispered conversations while they waited at red lights. Carmen stood behind the triage desk, arms crossed, watching the family reunion with the kind of expression that said she'd seen this before, that she knew how this story ended, that she was documenting everything in her head for the incident report she'd file later. The security guard stood next to her, hand resting on his belt, ready to intervene if needed. The drunk college kids had moved on, replaced by an elderly man with chest pain and a teenager who'd crashed his bike. Normal ER night, except for this one small drama playing out in the waiting area. "Let's go home," Dad said finally. First words he'd spoken, his voice sounded rough, unused. "We'll talk there." "We should talk now," Maya said. "Not here," Dad said, glancing around at the watching staff, the security camera, the witnesses. "At home." Maya stood up slowly, testing her balance, her strength. The incisions pulled but held. She handed the heated blanket back to Carmen, who took it with both hands like she was receiving something precious. Their eyes met for a moment, and Carmen said low enough that only Maya could hear, "You need anything, you come back here, you ask for me. Understand?" Maya nodded. She understood. She understood that Carmen had seen something wrong tonight, something that violated the unspoken rules of how families were supposed to work, and she was offering what she could: a safe place, a witness, a person who would remember. Maya wanted to hug her. Instead, she just said, "Thank you." The drive took 20 minutes. Maya sat in the back seat of Dad's SUV, same seat she'd woken up in, same dried blood on her arm, same hospital bracelet cutting into her wrist, and watched Derek's car follow 2 car lengths behind, his turn signal flashing in perfect sync with Dad's. Mom kept turning around to look at her, opening her mouth to say something, closing it again. Her lipstick was smudged at one corner. She'd been crying in the car before they got to the hospital, Maya realized. Fresh tears on old mascara. She'd been crying before she even saw Maya, before she knew if Maya was okay. Dad drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes fixed forward, jaw working like he was chewing words he couldn't swallow. The radio stayed off. The heater hummed. Outside, the city slid past in the pre-dawn darkness, empty streets, closed storefronts, a homeless man pushing a shopping cart full of aluminum cans. Normal people doing normal things at abnormal hours. Maya watched it all through the window and felt like she was watching a movie of her own life, like she was somewhere else entirely, observing from a distance. Home was the house Maya grew up in, the one with the maple tree out front that turned red every October, the driveway that flooded when it rained, the front porch light that Dad never remembered to turn off. She'd been staying in her old bedroom for 8 months now, ever since the layoffs, since her landlord sold her building, since everything fell apart in the kind of slow-motion collapse that feels like drowning. Derek had offered to put her on his insurance. "Family plan," he'd said, sitting at the same kitchen table, pushing papers across to her. "You need surgery anyway, might as well take care of it now. It'll save you money in the long run." She'd been grateful then. Felt like a burden, but grateful. Felt like she owed them something for taking her in, for giving her a place to land when everything else fell through. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and something else. Something stale. Leftover dinner from 2 nights ago, maybe? Or the garbage that needed taking out. Mail was piled on the kitchen counter, junk mostly, credit card offers, grocery store circulars, a utility bill with final notice, stamped in red. Maya moved toward it on autopilot, muscle memory from the months of living here, opening envelopes while Mom made breakfast, sorting bills while Derek complained about his commute. Her hands found an envelope with her name on it, postmarked 2 days before the surgery. Official looking. Insurance company logo in the corner. She opened it while Mom fussed with the kettle, while Derek hovered in the doorway like he wasn't sure if he should stay or go, while Dad disappeared into the living room, where the TV clicked on to early morning news. The paper inside was dense with insurance jargon, the kind of form that requires 3 readings to understand. Maya's eyes caught on key phrases: pre-authorization approved, extended observation post-op complications, claim filed. The date stamped at the top made her hands go still. The morning of her surgery. Before she'd even changed into the hospital gown, before the anesthesiologist asked her to count backward from 10, before the first incision was made, someone had filed a claim for complications that hadn't happened yet. Someone had anticipated problems that didn't exist. Someone had planned for her to stay longer than the standard discharge window. She read it again. Derek's name as primary policyholder, her name as dependent. A billing code for extended observation, the kind that pays out when a patient stays longer than the standard discharge window. The kind that pays more when things go wrong, when recovery takes longer, when complications arise. The kind that requires documentation, timestamps, proof that the patient was indeed under observation for the extended period. Maya looked at the security footage timestamps in her mind. Discharge signed at 11:43 p.m. Family left by midnight. She woke up at 2:47 a.m., 3 hours in the car. Technically, 3 hours of extended observation, if you were generous with the definition. If you counted being unconscious in a locked vehicle as observation. If you were the kind of person who looked at insurance codes and saw opportunity instead of obligation. Extended observation, Maya said out loud. Cute. Mom turned from the kettle, steam rising around her face. What? Nothing. Maya folded the paper, slid it back in the envelope, set it on the counter like a coaster under a phantom drink. Her body felt distant, anesthesia or shock or something else entirely. She wanted to ask about the claim, wanted to hold up the paper and demand an explanation. But her mouth wouldn't form the words, her brain too foggy to construct the accusation properly. So she just sat there, staring at the envelope, while Mom brought tea in the blue mug Maya always used as a kid, the one with the chip on the rim from when she dropped it in the sink at age 7. Mom sat across from Maya at the kitchen table, wrapped her hands around her own mug, and started talking. Last night was so chaotic, she said. The words came out smooth, practiced, like she'd been rehearsing in the car. You know how hospitals are, everyone's exhausted? The nurse said you were good to go and Derek had all the paperwork, and we all thought, you'd be more comfortable in my car because the seat reclines, but then Derek said he'd already put you in Dad's car, and we got our signals crossed. Maya sipped her tea. It was too hot, burned her tongue. She sipped again anyway, welcomed the small, clean pain of it, the way it cut through the fog. Mom kept talking, voice rising and falling in a rhythm that felt rehearsed, and Maya watched her hands shake around the mug. Small tremors, barely visible, the same hands that used to braid her hair before school, that signed permission slips, that held her when she cried after her first breakup. The same hands that somewhere between 11:15 p.m. and midnight had decided it was okay to leave. Everyone was so tired, Mom said again, like repetition made it true, like saying it enough times would erase the 3 hours Maya spent alone in a parking deck. Derek appeared in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, face in shadow. I really am sorry, Maya. It was a mistake. I know, Maya said, because it was easier than arguing, easier than asking questions she wasn't ready to hear answered, easier than holding up the insurance form and watching him try to explain why it was filed before she even went under, why the claim was submitted for extended observation when the plan was always to go home the same night, why everything about this felt calculated, in a way that made her stomach hurt worse than the incisions. Dad never came into the kitchen. She heard him in the living room. TV on low, the sound of a basketball game he wasn't watching. The sports anchor's voice droned on about scores and statistics, meaningless numbers that filled the silence. Maya finished her tea, stood up carefully, and walked to her childhood bedroom without saying goodnight. Nobody stopped her. Nobody asked if she needed help. The door closed with a soft click, and she was alone with her thoughts and the medical bracelet still cutting into her wrist and the envelope of paperwork still sitting on the kitchen counter like evidence nobody wanted to see. 3 days passed, in a blur of recovery and avoidance. Maya stayed in her room mostly, venturing out for meals and bathroom trips, moving carefully around the incisions that pulled with every step. Mom brought food on trays, soup, crackers, ginger ale, the kind of sick person food that Maya associated with childhood flus and stomach bugs. Derek knocked twice to ask how she was feeling, stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, never quite meeting her eyes. Dad remained invisible, a ghost in his own house, present only in the sounds he made, footsteps on the stairs, the flush of a toilet, the opening and closing of the refrigerator at odd hours. The medical bracelet stayed on because Maya kept forgetting to cut it off, or maybe because some part of her wanted the reminder, wanted the physical proof that this had happened, that she hadn't dreamed the whole thing. The plastic dug into her skin, left a permanent red line around her wrist. She touched it sometimes, traced the indentation with her finger, felt the ridge where her skin had swollen slightly around the edges. On the third night, Maya couldn't sleep. The incisions ached despite the painkillers. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear everything. The furnace clicking on, pipes settling, the maple tree scraping against the window. She picked up her phone, scrolled through the family text thread from the night of the surgery, and saw the messages again with different eyes. Derek at 11:12 p.m. She's out. Paperwork done. Meet at the car. Mom's reply, I'll bring the car around. Dad at 11:15 p.m. See you at home. Not see you at the hospital. Not see you in the waiting room. Not see you after we get Maya settled. Just see you at home. Maya read those 3 words until they burned themselves into her brain, until she could recite them backward, until they lost all meaning and became just sounds. All three of them left together. Derek signed her out, put her in the car, and all three of them drove away in separate vehicles without a single person checking, without a single person confirming, without a single person asking the basic question, where is Maya? The math was simple. Discharge papers signed at 11:43 p.m., family texts ending at 11:15 p.m., security footage showing 3, cars leaving by midnight. They'd all left. Together. Without her. Not a miscommunication, not cross signals. A decision. Maybe not a conscious one, maybe not malicious, but a decision nonetheless. A moment when 3 people all chose to drive away without verifying, without checking, without caring enough to make absolutely certain that she wasn't being left behind. The house settled around her, old wood creaking, furnace clicking on with a whoosh of forced air. Maya sat on the edge of her childhood bed, same quilt her grandmother made, same pillows she'd had since high school, same glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that she'd stuck up there at age 9, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not rage, not even hurt, not anymore. Just a question, cold and clear and impossible to ignore. What am I worth to them exactly? And underneath that question, another one, quieter but more urgent. What am I worth to myself? Morning came gray and quiet, the kind of November morning that never quite gets light. Maya heard voices in the hallway, Derek's voice pitched low, talking to someone on the phone. She got up, moved to the door on legs that still felt unsteady, pressed her ear against the wood like she was 12 again, eavesdropping on adult conversations about divorce and money and things she wasn't supposed to understand. Confirming the claim payout, Derek was saying. His voice had that professional quality he used for work calls, smooth and confident. Yeah, she was there overnight. Extended observation, post-op complications, the whole thing. A pause. Maya held her breath. Yeah, it really adds up. No problems with the discharge. Everything went smoothly. Another pause, then a laugh, short and nervous. Yeah, I know. Okay, thanks. I'll watch for the check. Maya stepped back from the door. Her hands found the medical bracelet on her wrist, the plastic band that had been cutting off her circulation for 3 days straight. She'd gotten used to the pressure, the way it made her fingers tingle, the constant reminder against her skin. Now it felt like a shackle. She walked to the kitchen, empty, everyone else still asleep or pretending to be, found scissors in the drawer by the sink, and cut the bracelet off with 2 quick snips. It fell into the trash can with a soft plastic sound, landing on top of a banana peel and yesterday's coffee grounds. She stared at it for a moment, pale blue, her name printed in black ink, the hospital logo, the admission date and time, then covered it with a paper towel and walked away. Her laptop was on the desk in her room, buried under a stack of books she'd been meaning to read and a sweatshirt she'd worn 2 days ago. Maya opened it, pulled up apartment listings and started scrolling. Studio apartments, 1-bedrooms, places with month-to-month leases and security deposits she could maybe afford if she was careful, if she stopped eating out, if she gave up the small luxuries that made life bearable. She bookmarked 3, a studio above a coffee shop, a converted garage behind someone's house, a basement apartment with its own entrance. Saved the links in a folder labeled Future. Closed the laptop, no announcement, no confrontation, just quiet preparation, the kind that happens in the space between one breath and the next, when you realize you've already decided something and your body is just catching up. The medical bracelet sat in the trash. Maya sat on her bed and stared at the pale line it had left on her wrist, the indent still visible, skin slightly discolored from days of constant pressure. She touched the mark gently, traced it with her finger, felt the ridge where her flesh had molded itself around the plastic. A scar that would fade eventually, but for now remained as evidence. Proof that she'd been somewhere, that something had happened, that she hadn't imagined the whole thing. Outside her window, the maple tree swayed in the wind, branches mostly bare now, a few stubborn leaves clinging on. The house creaked. Downstairs she heard Mom making breakfast, the familiar sounds of the coffee maker gurgling, pans clanking, the refrigerator door opening and closing. Heard the TV in the living room click onto morning news, Dad's territory. Heard Derek's car pull out of the driveway at exactly 7:15 a.m., same as every weekday, his schedule as predictable as clockwork. Normal morning sounds in a house that no longer felt like home, that maybe never really was home. That was just a place she'd lived while waiting for her real life to start. Maya pulled out her phone, texted the first landlord on her list. Is the studio still available? Hit send before she could second-guess it, before she could talk herself out of it, before the practical voice in her head could start listing all the reasons this was a bad idea. The reply came back in 3 minutes. Yes. When can you come see it? Maya typed, today? 2 p.m. work? Perfect. She set the phone down, looked at the medical bracelet one more time, through the white plastic of the trash bag, visible between the paper towel and a crumpled tissue. Felt something loosen in her chest, some knot she'd been carrying for 8 months unraveling one strand at a time. Not forgiveness, not understanding, just space. Room to breathe. Room to decide what came next without the weight of their expectations pressing down on her shoulders like a physical thing, like a hand pushing her underwater. At noon, Maya came downstairs. Mom was doing dishes, hands deep in sudsy water, radio playing softly on the counter, some talk show about gardening, completely irrelevant to November. Dad was reading the paper at the table, same spot he always sat, coffee gone cold in his mug. Derek's car was still gone, wouldn't be back until after 6. She poured herself coffee from the pot Mom had made, drank it standing at the counter, and said, I'm going out for a bit. Where? Mom asked, turning from the sink suds, dripping from her yellow gloves. Just out. Maya rinsed her mug, set it in the drying rack next to the others. I'll be back later. Do you need a ride? Mom's voice had that careful quality, like she was trying to rebuild something that had shattered. You shouldn't be driving yet. I'll manage. Maya? I'll be back later, Maya said again, more firmly this time. She didn't wait for a response. Grabbed her coat from the hook by the door, her wallet from her room, her keys to a car she no longer owned but still carried out of habit, the metal warm in her pocket. Called a rideshare from the driveway, standing in the cold November air, breath visible in small clouds. Waited 5 minutes until a gray Honda pulled up, driver nodding at her through the windshield. The driver didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk, just followed the GPS to an address in a neighborhood Maya barely knew, 20 minutes across town in an area where the houses were smaller, the lawns less maintained, the cars older and more practical. The studio apartment was small, one window with a view of a laundromat's neon sign, wash dry fold in pink and blue letters, one of the tubes flickering like it was about to die. Kitchenette in the corner, 2-burner stove and a mini fridge, barely enough counter space for a cutting board. Bathroom the size of a closet, shower stall with a curtain that had seen better days. But it was clean and it was cheap, and the landlord, a woman in her 60s named Diane with kind eyes and practical shoes, looked at Maya like she saw something familiar, something she recognized. First month's rent plus deposit, Diane said, handing Maya the application. You got a job? Working on it, Maya said, and it felt like the most honest thing she'd said in days. Diane nodded slowly, studying Maya's face. You seem like you need a place. Maya almost cried. Felt the tears building behind her eyes, hot and sudden, threatening to spill over. Didn't let them. Just swallowed hard and said, Yeah, I do. I'll hold it for 3 days, Diane said, and there was something gentle in her voice, something that said she'd been there too, had needed a place once, had understood what it meant to start over. Fill out the application, get me the deposit, it's yours. Maya wanted to hug her, wanted to thank her for understanding, for not asking questions, for seeing her as a person instead of a credit score or a reference list. Instead, she just shook Diane's hand, firm grip, calloused palm, and said thank you 3 times, meaning it more each time. Rode back to the house with an application form in her bag and a phone number written on the back of a business card, and something like hope sitting in her chest where the knot used to be. 3 days. She could do 3 days. She could do anything for 3 days. That night, she sat in her childhood bedroom and made a list. Things she needed. First month's rent, deposit, basic furniture, a job that paid more, the minimum wage. Things she had, $800 in savings, a car that technically belonged to Derek since he'd co-signed the loan when she lost her job, and the kind of determination that only comes from waking up alone in a parking deck at 2:47 a.m. and realizing nobody came back for you. Nobody even checked. The medical bracelet was still in the trash. Maya fished it out later that evening, after everyone had gone to bed, after the house settled into its nighttime silence. Wiped off coffee grounds and a piece of banana peel, rinsed it under the bathroom sink, dried it with toilet paper. Tucked it into her desk drawer, beneath old school papers and birthday cards she'd never thrown away. Not a trophy, not even a reminder of the betrayal. just proof that she'd survived something. Evidence of a moment when everything changed, when the math stopped adding up, when she looked at her family and saw them clearly for the first time in years. Saw them not as the people who loved her, but as people who had made a calculation and decided she was worth less than their convenience, less than their comfort, less than whatever they gained by leaving her behind. She closed the drawer, opened her laptop, started applying for jobs, receptionist, admin assistant, data entry, anything that came with health insurance and a steady paycheck and the promise of independence. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, filling in forms, uploading her resume, writing cover letters that all said basically the same thing. I'm reliable, I'm motivated, I need this more than you know. Her finger hovered over the submit button on the third application, and she thought about Derek's voice on the phone, talking about claim payouts and extended observation, laughing about how it all adds up. Did you forget me? She wondered, or did you need me to stay? The question sat in her chest like a stone. Maya clicked submit. Started another application. Then another. Outside, the maple tree scraped branches against her window, a rhythmic sound that was almost comforting in its consistency. Somewhere in the house, someone laughed at something on TV, the sound muffled through walls and closed doors. The night stretched long and cold and strangely clarifying, the kind of night where everything becomes obvious, where the truth sits right in front of you and you finally have the courage to look at it directly. By midnight, she'd applied to 11 jobs. By 1 a.m., she'd finished the apartment application, signed it with a pen that barely worked, the ink skipping in places, and sealed it in an envelope to drop off tomorrow. The medical bracelet stayed in the drawer. Maya stayed in her room. And the question stayed unanswered because some questions don't need answers. They just need to be asked, just need to exist long enough to change the shape of everything that comes after. She looked at her wrist, at the pale line where the bracelet had been, and touched it gently. A mark that would fade. Evidence that would disappear, but she would remember. She would remember waking up alone, remember the cold concrete under her hospital socks, remember the way her family looked at her in the ER like she was the problem, like she was the one who'd done something wrong by being exactly where they'd left her. The house settled into deeper silence. Maya turned off her lamp, lay in the darkness, and made herself a promise. She would leave. Not dramatically, not with accusations or confrontations or tearful goodbyes. She would just leave. Quietly. Deliberately. The same way they'd left her in that parking deck, without fanfare, without explanation, without looking back. And maybe that was justice enough. The coffee shop was called Grounds, which Maya found amusing in a way she couldn't quite articulate. Something about being grounded, about finding solid footing, about the grounds for divorce or dismissal or whatever legal term applied to severing family ties. Derek sat across from her in a booth by the window, afternoon light turning his face into planes of shadow and brightness. He'd brought a gift bag, pale blue tissue paper sticking out the top like a child's craft project. I'm glad you wanted to meet, he said, pushing the bag toward her. Mom and Dad wanted to come, but I thought, just us, you know? Sibling to sibling. Maya left the bag untouched. She pulled out the folded insurance claim from her pocket, smoothed it on the table between them, her hand steady in a way that surprised her. Walk me through this. Derek's eyes dropped to the paper. She watched his face shift, first confusion, genuine or performed, then something harder to read. His jaw tightened. That's just paperwork. You don't understand how insurance works. Educate me. He leaned back, arms crossing over his chest. Defensive posture, the kind their father used when Mom questioned the credit card bill. The claim got filed because you needed surgery. I put you on my insurance because you didn't have any. Do you know how much that surgery cost? $12,000. $12,000? And the family's been covering your rent, your food. I pay rent, Maya said quietly. $300 a month isn't rent, Maya. It's charity. His voice rose slightly, enough that the barista glanced over. This family has carried you for 8 months. 8 months of you sleeping in your childhood bedroom, eating our food, using our electricity. And now you're going to sit here and what? Accuse me of something? Maya sipped her coffee. It was too bitter, needed cream, but she drank it anyway. The claim was filed 6 hours before I woke up alone in a parking deck. That's not... Derek stopped, reset. You're twisting this. The pre-authorization is standard. You file it before surgery in case complications arise. That's how it works. That's literally how insurance works. And the extended observation? You stayed overnight. In a car. Silence stretched between them. Outside, a woman walked past with a dog, a small terrier that pulled against its leash. Derek's fingers drummed against the table, a nervous rhythm. Maya waited. She'd learned something in the 3 days since she'd found that paper. Patience was a weapon. Silence was a tool. People filled quiet spaces with truth if you just gave them enough room. "Look," Derek said finally, voice dropping. "I don't know what you want me to say. Yeah, we messed up. We left you in the car. That was wrong. I've apologized. Mom's been crying about it for days, but this," he tapped the paper, "this is you being cruel. You're making this into something it's not." "What is it then?" "It's a mistake. It's paperwork. It's me trying to help you and you throwing it back in my face." Maya leaned forward slightly. The question came out steady, each word measured. "Did you forget me, or did you need me to stay long enough to file the claim?" Derek's face went red. Not embarrassment, anger. Pure, sudden anger that made his eyes narrow. "Are you serious right now? You think what, planned this? You think I deliberately left you in a parking deck for insurance money?" He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're unbelievable. You know that?" "Absolutely unbelievable." He stood up, grabbed his coat from the bench. "I came here to apologize, to make things right. And this is what I get. Fine. You want to believe I'm some kind of villain? Go ahead, but don't come back to the house expecting us to keep carrying you." Maya stayed seated. "I wasn't planning to." Derek stared at her, seemed about to say something else, then grabbed the gift bag, the one she'd never opened, and walked out. The door chimed behind him. Maya sat alone in the booth, her coffee going cold, and realized the answer had been in what he didn't say. Not denial, not explanation, just anger, just deflection, just a threat about not caring her anymore, as if that's what she'd wanted in the first place. She finished her coffee, left a tip for the barista, walked out into the November afternoon with something close to clarity settling in her chest. That evening, Maya met with Diane at a small office above a tax preparation service. The healthcare billing advocate had been Diane's idea. "I know someone who might help," she'd said when Maya dropped off the application. The advocate's name was Ruth, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain and a manner that suggested she'd seen every kind of medical billing fraud imaginable. Ruth examined the insurance claim, made notes on a legal pad, and said, "This is insurance fraud. Pretty clear cut. Pre-authorization filed for extended observation, discharge time suggesting complications that required overnight monitoring, but you were never actually under medical supervision during that time. What happens if I report it?" "Investigation. Possibly charges. Your brother could lose his insurance, might face fines." Ruth looked at Maya over her glasses. "But here's what you need to understand. This will get messy. Family cases always do. And in the end, the insurance company recovers their money, your brother gets a slap on the wrist, and you're left dealing with the fallout." Maya thought about that. Thought about Derek's face in the coffee shop, the anger that came too quick, too defensive. Thought about Mom crying in the kitchen, Dad disappearing into the TV, 3 months of living in a house where nobody quite met her eyes. What if I don't report it? Then nothing happens. He keeps the payout, you move on with your life, and the insurance company never knows the difference. That feels wrong. Ruth nodded slowly. Sometimes choosing peace over justice feels wrong, but you're the one who has to live with the decision. Not me, not your family, you. Maya drove past the house that night. Didn't stop, didn't slow down, just drove past and looked at it through the windshield. All the lights on, both cars in the driveway, the maple tree dark against the porch light. Kept driving. Turned left at the intersection instead of right. Went to the studio apartment, stood outside looking at the neon sign flickering in the window, and made a decision that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with the kind of person she wanted to be. 2 months later, Maya had a small studio apartment, one window with a view of that laundromat's neon sign, a futon she'd bought off Craigslist, a kettle that whistled when the water boiled. It was enough. More than enough. The first morning she'd woken up there, she'd lain on the futon for 10 minutes just feeling the silence, the absence of footsteps above her, of Mom's voice calling about breakfast, of Derek's car starting in the driveway. Just her own breathing and the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of someone doing laundry downstairs. She'd gotten a job at a medical billing company of all places. The irony wasn't lost on her. 40 hours a week processing claims, learning the codes, understanding the system that had been used to. What? She still wasn't sure. File a fraudulent claim? Cover costs they resented paying? Both? Neither? It didn't matter anymore. The job paid enough for rent and food and the slow accumulation of furniture that turned a space into a home. Her phone rang occasionally, Mom mostly, leaving voicemails that Maya listened to once and then deleted. "We miss you. Come to Sunday dinner?" "Your father asks about you." The subtext was always the same. Come back, pretend it didn't happen, let's return to normal. But normal was the problem. Normal was being forgotten in a parking deck. Normal was insurance fraud. Normal was a family that calculated worth in dollars and convenience. Tonight, Maya met Jenna for dinner, a former coworker from her old job. Before the layoffs, before everything fell apart, they'd reconnected through a message on social media, the casual kind that turns into actual friendship when you need it most. Jenna ordered pasta, Maya got a salad, and they talked about nothing important for 20 minutes before Jenna said, "You doing okay? You seem lighter." Maya paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "Yeah, I think I am." "Good. You seemed weighed down before, like you were carrying something heavy." "I was." Maya set her fork down. "I think I finally put it down." They talked until the restaurant started closing, until the waiter brought the check with an apologetic smile. Walked out into the cold night, breath visible in clouds, and Jenna hugged her goodbye, quick and warm and uncomplicated. Maya drove home through empty streets, parked in front of the laundromat, climbed the stairs to her studio, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Contentment. The medical bracelet was still in her drawer. She'd brought it with her when she moved, tucked into a box with old photos and birthday cards and things she couldn't quite throw away. Now she took it out, held it in the lamplight, traced her finger over her printed name. Evidence of a night that changed everything. Proof that she'd survived. Maya stood at her window, looking down at the empty street, the neon sign casting pink and blue light across the pavement. She thought about the deadbolt she'd installed herself, the satisfying click of it catching, the way it made her feel safe in a way the old house never had. Thought about the job offer letter that had arrived last week. Better position, better pay, health insurance that was hers alone. Thought about the 5K she'd run 2 weekends ago, finishing in 42 minutes, legs burning, lungs screaming, crossing the finish line with a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with anyone's approval but her own. She dropped the medical bracelet in the trash, the small bin under her sink, lined with a grocery bag. This time it felt final. Not angry, not performative, just done. She was done carrying it. Done letting it remind her of what they'd done. Done defining herself by that moment of abandonment. Maya pulled up her sleeve. On her wrist was a new bracelet, bright yellow fabric from the 5K, still smelling faintly of sweat and effort and triumph. She'd worn it every day since, a reminder that she could do hard things, that she could run distances she'd never imagined, that she was stronger than she'd known. The fabric sat where the medical bracelet had left its mark, covering the faint line that was almost gone now. She touched it gently, felt the texture of it, the proof of her own capability. This one she'd earned. This one was hers. And nobody, not Derek, not Mom, not Dad, not anyone, could take it from her or twist it into something else or use it for purposes she hadn't intended. It was just hers, simple and true and entirely hers. Outside, the neon sign flickered and held. The laundromat's machines hummed their endless cycle. Someone laughed on the street below. Maya pulled her sleeve down, turned off the lamp, and climbed into bed. Tomorrow she'd wake up in her own space, make coffee in her own kettle, go to her own job, come home to her own four walls. Tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Not perfect, not easy, but hers. And that, she thought, as sleep finally came, was worth more than any insurance payout. Worth more than Sunday dinners and family photos and the performance of belonging. Worth everything. The apartment had been hers for 6 weeks when Maya found the second envelope. It arrived at her parents' house, forwarded by Mom with no note attached, just Maya's new address written in careful handwriting on a yellow sticky note. The envelope was from the insurance company. Maya opened it standing in her kitchenette, kettle whistling behind her, and read the letter twice before its meaning sank in. Claim under review. Discrepancies noted in discharge documentation. Please contact our fraud investigation department. She set the letter on her counter, the small strip of laminate that served as her entire food prep area, and stared at it while her tea steeped. Someone had reported it. Not her. She'd decided weeks ago not to pursue it, to let it go, to move forward instead of backward. But someone else had seen the same numbers she'd seen, the same timeline, The same impossible math of being under observation while unconscious in a locked car. Maya thought about calling Derek. Warning him, maybe. Or Mom. But her hand stayed away from her phone. This wasn't her problem anymore. She'd removed herself from the equation. Whatever happened next would happen without her intervention, without her protection, without her carrying the weight of their decisions. She drank her tea, went to work, came home. The letter stayed on the counter for 3 days before she finally filed it in the folder labeled medical and forgot about it. The call came on a Tuesday. Maya was at her desk, processing a claim for someone's knee replacement, when her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe to accept, made her say hello into the quiet space between her cubicle walls. Maya, it's Derek. His voice sounded different, smaller somehow, uncertain in a way she'd never heard before. Hi, she said, neutral as Switzerland. Did you report the claim? No. Silence. Then, the insurance company is investigating. They want documentation. They're saying the discharge time doesn't match the observation period. They're saying someone might have committed fraud. Maya scrolled through the knee replacement claim on her screen. Everything in order. Clean documentation, no discrepancies. I'm sorry that's happening. Are you? Derek's voice had an edge now, the uncertainty hardening into something sharper. Because it feels like maybe you wanted this. Maybe you're happy about it. I'm not happy about it, Maya said, and realized it was true. She wasn't happy. She wasn't sad. She wasn't anything. The claim, the investigation, Derek's panic, it all felt distant, like something happening to strangers in a story she'd once read. But I didn't cause it. You could help. You could tell them it was a mistake, that you were under observation the whole time. I wasn't. Maya, I woke up alone in a parking deck at 2:47 a.m., Derek. I was alone for 3 hours. That's not observation. That's abandonment. She heard him breathe into the phone, heard voices in the background. Mom, maybe, asking questions he wasn't answering. I could lose my insurance. Do you understand that? I could lose everything. I understand, Maya said softly, but I can't lie for you. I won't. After everything this family has done for you. Goodbye, Derek. She hung up before he could finish, set her phone face down on her desk. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the surface until they stilled. That night, Maya couldn't focus on anything. She tried reading, tried watching TV, tried scrolling mindlessly through her phone. Nothing worked. The conversation with Derek kept replaying in her head, his voice saying after everything this family has done for you, like it was a debt she could never repay. Like love came with an invoice, like belonging had a price tag she'd failed to meet. She pulled on her running shoes at 8 p.m., even though it was dark and cold and probably not safe. Ran 4 miles through her neighborhood, past the laundromat and the convenience store and the park where teenagers gathered to smoke. Ran until her lungs burned and her legs ached and her mind finally went quiet. Came back to her studio dripping sweat, chest heaving, and felt something like peace. The shower was lukewarm. The building's water heater struggled after 6 p.m., but Maya stood under it anyway, letting the water run over her shoulders, watching it circle the drain. She thought about Derek losing his insurance. Thought about Mom's face when she found out. Thought about Dad retreating further into silence, into the glow of the television, into wherever he went when things got uncomfortable. She thought about Carmen, the ER nurse who'd wrapped her in a heated blanket and made phone calls and pulled security footage. Carmen who'd said in 12 years, I've never seen someone get left in a parking deck. Carmen who'd given Maya her phone number and said, you need anything, you come back here. Maya got out of the shower, dried off with a towel that had seen better days, and made a decision. She found Carmen's number in her phone, stared at it for a full minute, then typed out a message. This is Maya. From November, the parking deck. I wanted to say thank you for everything. The response came back in less than 5 minutes. Honey, I remember you. How are you doing? They texted back and forth for 20 minutes. Short messages, easy conversation. Carmen asked about the recovery, about where Maya was living now, about whether she'd followed up with her surgeon. Maya asked about the ER, about whether Carmen still worked nights, about whether she'd seen anything strange lately. Normal conversation between two people who'd shared one terrible night and somehow stayed connected. At the end, Carmen wrote, You ever need anything, you let me know. I mean that. Maya typed back, I will. Thank you. She set her phone down and realized she was smiling. Something about Carmen's kindness, uncomplicated, undemanding, freely given, made the world feel less heavy, made the thing with Derek feel smaller, not gone, but manageable, survivable. The investigation took 3 weeks to resolve. Maya never found out the details, never asked, never searched, never called Derek or Mom or Dad to inquire. She just went to work, came home, ran her miles, made her tea, existed in the small, beautiful space of her own life. The medical billing job taught her things about the system, about how claims worked and how fraud was caught and how often people tried to game a system that was already rigged against them. She learned to spot discrepancies in her sleep, learned the codes that raised red flags, learned that most fraud was caught not through investigation, but through simple math. Timestamps that didn't align, procedures that didn't match diagnoses, observation periods that existed on paper but not in reality. One afternoon, her supervisor called her into the office. You're good at this, she said, gesturing at Maya's accuracy reports. Really good. There's an opening in our fraud investigation department. Better pay, better hours. You interested? Maya thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Thought about Derek's voice on the phone, desperate and angry. Thought about the insurance form filed before she'd even gone under. Thought about waking up alone in the cold concrete under her hospital socks, and the 3 hours that nobody noticed she was missing. Yes, she said, I'm very interested. She started the new position 2 weeks later. The irony wasn't lost on her, investigating insurance fraud, catching the kind of discrepancies she'd once been victim to. But it felt right somehow, felt like taking the worst night of her life and turning it into something useful, something that might help someone else, someone who woke up alone and wondered if they were worth remembering. The yellow bracelet from the 5K stayed on her wrist. Maya added another one 3 months later, a different race, a different color, proof of different miles run and different finish lines crossed. She started collecting them, these fabric reminders of her own capability, her own strength, her own worth that had nothing to do with family or obligation or the complicated math of belonging. And every time she looked down at her wrist, at the layers of color and achievement and proof, she thought, these ones I earned? Every single one.